As you saw, it's our 106th anniversary. And second, we are so excited to kick off our new web series, Developing a Champion Player. This is going to be the first installment of a 4-part series. So thank you for joining us tonight for the very first session. I'd like to kick things off by introducing to you our new Vice President and our CFO, Robert Foster, for a welcome.
Thank you, Deanne. The American Tennis Association, or the ATA, is the oldest African-American national sports organization here in the United States since 1916. And today is a very special day. November 30th is the 106th birthday of our historic organization. Imagine more than a dozen African-American tennis clubs and affluent people of color came together in Washington, D.C. on this date in 1916 to form a national tennis association that would parallel the United States Lawn Tennis Association, which is now the USTA. Since 1916, we have been an organization of volunteers with no paid staff. Nevertheless, we are dedicated to grow this game in our many underserved communities. Moreover, we are focused on helping our youth to develop cognitive and social emotional learning skills that are absolutely critical to be successful in today's society. Many of you know that yesterday was Giving Tuesday, but we are extending our Giving Tuesday fundraiser to give you an opportunity to help our juniors financially, expand our digital footprint, and increase our educational program. You can go to our website and you'll see our platform there of ways that you can give money to help us, to help our community. Now to the business at hand. Today's program will be moderated by our Executive Director, Deanne Chavan. Deanne, it's all yours.
Thank you, Robert. That was awesome. And so we have 4 members, 3 members of a panel this evening. And first up this evening is our ATA historian, Art Carrington. Art graduated from Hampton University, and he was #1 in singles and doubles and a player for 4 years. Also a 3-time conference champion between the years of 1965 and 1969. Art actually played in the U.S. National championships at Forest Hills in 1966. And he won the men's double champion in 66 and 67. He also was the 1972 ATA champion. And he also did matches with Black players such as Bud Collins, Althea Gibson, to name a few. He is a true trailblazer, has received numerous accolades. And I think you've seen him recently on TV as he was used for 2 documentaries, the award-winning Althea documentary and Citizen Ash. So we are so honored to have Art here this evening with us. He actually also in all of that runs an academy, the Carrington Tennis Academy up in Connecticut. So Art, thank you for being here. I'm going to moderate this evening. I'll be throwing out questions to each of our panelists. Art will go first, and then our second panelist and our third panelist. And so first, Art, I would like you to talk a little bit of the role of community tennis and how it built the ATA.
Okay, I'm glad to be here, Deanna, and good to see you, Robert, and hello to all of our audience. What I'd like to do would be to start in what I call the golden age of American Tennis Association, which is like 1937. I believe when Robert was here visiting me, we counted 200 clubs that was a member of the ATA in 1937. Do you remember that, Robert?
Yes.
Yeah, you know, so the local clubs are what created the American Tennis Association. You said that the American Tennis Association was founded in 1916, and in 1898 in Philadelphia was where the first inter-club match, national interclub match occurred for African Americans. And that was at the girls YWCA in Germantown, Philadelphia. So what we had was every year, these clubs would come together from 1898. And then 1915, the guys at the dinner in New York said, why don't we start a national organization and start promoting tennis on a national level? And so that's where it all began for the ATA as a parent organization to help foster the development of tennis amongst our community in America. So we had like, we had the Florida Tennis Association, the New England Tennis Association, the New Jersey Tennis Association, the New York Tennis Association, the North Carolina Tennis Association, the Pennsylvania Tennis Association, the Southern Tennis Association, the Virginia Tennis Association, the Southern Intercollegiate Tennis Association, the Western Federation of Tennis Clubs, West Virginia Tennis Association, the Midwest Tennis Association, South Carolina Tennis Association, and the Georgia Tennis Association. So, and each one of these associations was made up, they were made up of numerous clubs. So for myself in New Jersey, as a youngster playing at the North End Tennis Club, first of all, those were the only two courts that were visible in the city of New Jersey. The other course was at the Elizabethtown and Country Club, which was a member of the USTA founding when it was founded in 1881. That was only about a quarter of a mile from me, but I never saw the inside of the place. So, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
fortunately, I didn't, because I never felt like I missed out on anything and I end up being better than all the guys that were there anyway. So that, but I was glad, because maybe if I'd have known about it, I'd been so hung up about what I was left out of that I wouldn't have took care of business. So, I was very fortunate to not know. But anyway, at these two courts in my neighborhood was two clay courts, and I saw all these black tennis players. A friend of mine that I met in the 5th grade moved across the street from these tennis courts, and I'd go to his house and we see these people wearing white shorts and, driving Alfa Romeos and Mercedes Benzes and Jaguars and things. And we were really like, what's going on here? And so that's how I got introduced to tennis. And I thought it was a black game. I never saw a white tennis player. This was a little black club, 2 tennis courts. That's the only tennis we ever saw. Althea Gibson, #1 in the country, in the world. She comes to the tennis courts. The woman that lived across the street was named Nana Davis Vaughan. She lost to Althea in the finals of the ATA in 1948. So she was a member there. So I had every reason to think that tennis was a black game. And so that's what got me started, when not until I began to venture out into higher level tournaments and did I realize that I was an anomaly, that people weren't, it's like they would always ask me, well, who are you? Where'd you come from? And so that's what got me to start my book when I got older, because I was tired of people. I was very proud of the ATA and the opportunity and the people that were around that I had this opportunity. And so they always wanted to know, where you from? So I didn't want to tell them my story. I wanted to show them who the ATA was. And so that's what made me archive all this material. So when I would talk about who I am, or the people that went before me, I'm my mentors. And so I didn't want it to just be oral. And that's what got me started in compiling, all this information. But when we start talking about growing tennis in our communities, then it all has a starting point. And the starting point was individuals that were enthusiastic about tennis, that started little clubs in our communities. Now around the United States, we had in the Northeast, between DC and Boston, we had all these little small private clubs in New York, and 2-court facilities, and they were always changing because the real estate was changing in these major cities, right? And so then when you went south, you had either people like Dr. Eaton, you had Dr. Johnson, you had guys with tennis courts in their yard, or you were affiliated with black colleges. That was the only two ways. There was no other recreation for black people. Once in a while, they let them play at a park on a day off from whites playing, but pretty much it was shut down recreationally. That's what all of that let's move north thing came from.
Yeah.
People had jobs. Go ahead.
Art, I wanted
Yes.
to ask you, because I know that, you're also a coach, right? So, and with all this background and all the things that you've seen, what do you think that has done to help you develop your training, that you do most, that coaches don't?
Well, first of all, I'm from the inner city of New Jersey. I'm from Elizabeth, New Jersey. I'm a city boy. I grew up playing basketball, all the sports. I played varsity basketball through high school. So what's missing is the type of training facility that we don't have. A training facilities that when you were talking about your son, we don't have the kind of training. I think every tennis facility should have a heavy bag. You understand? In my programs, I teach them martial arts, from boxing, stick fighting. It's all the things like the training that goes around tennis is what's missing for our boys. You understand? You go to facilities, it's just all about hitting balls. So even when they have them all day, but I'm like, well, what are you teaching them? You can't just drill all day. What are they learning new? And so to really have a high quality tennis player, you have to have a well-coordinated person. So my whole thing is the foundation has to be a good physical education, phys ed program. You start with a strong phys ed program, and tennis is a specialty. So the phys ed part of tennis, gets it into the whole body, the development of the whole body. And our boys like primal sports. I mean, most of the sports we played is the lower body. Movement is essential. So I start kids, teach them how to walk. You have to teach kids how to walk, because I'm a city boy. So we walk with a swagger, but the swagger, you understand, is what you play with. You need rhythm. So rhythm is essential in my program. That's utmost. We use martial arts tools. We use martial arts weapons. We use methods that we have to get your attention. People always say concentration. So what's the first thing in tennis? You always say you need concentration. Concentration on what? You need to watch the ball. So we have to teach kids how to pay attention. They got to learn how to pay attention. So that's where the training tools that I utilize off the court and around the court. But around the court, we need more of a gymnasium atmosphere. We need a more athletic environment. And so that's kind of like what's missing, that doesn't draw a lot of black boys to the tennis. That's
Yeah,
just one of
because
the main
we
things.
had a parent ask that question. And so for those of you who were on the webinar, we had some questions that were sent in that I'll be asking throughout. But if you do have another question, please put it in the chat or the Q&A. But yeah, they wanted to know how to keep Black boys engaged in tennis, because after a certain age, they seem to lose their interest in it. So those
Yeah, that's why I said it comes to, I really believe that it's the training that's missing.
right.
Like a boxer doesn't just train going in the ring boxing. So you got a speed bag for your hands to get speed. You got a speed rope for your feet. You know what I mean? You have all kind of equipment. You move around the gym. We don't have enough variety, enough diversity in the tennis environment. And so being that I don't have to, being that I'm a Black guy, I went to HBCs. I never changed my lifestyle. So all my clients come to me for that. I've always stayed true, because I felt like if I don't deal with the whole body, integration and coordination, before I deal with isolation. See, the coaches go to isolation before they go to whole body integration. So the kid, like I have basketball coach come in dealing with dribbling just from a coordination standpoint, because this is what we like to do. So you have to have an environment that has things that have the word enjoy. They got to enjoy what they're doing, and sometimes we don't have that. Hello, Keith.
Yep. So I'm going to ask you one more question before we turn it over to Keith for his part. How important is the parent relationship with the coach? And then that will segue into Keith.
Well, it's pretty much, like there's a parent, there's a player, and there's a coach. So like those are the, parent, player, coach in there. And I'm for total involvement. I have the parents involved in the program, in the kids' life, so that they know what's going on, how challenging it is, how difficult the task they're trying to, and many of the things the parents learn. So they learn to utilize the tools. They learn to utilize the illustrations and the different teaching techniques that I use. The parents learn so they can be like assistant coaches. I'm big on allowing the parents a lot of coaches are threatened by parents. I teach my parents. I educate. There's nothing better than an educated parent, but they got to be educated.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to turn over now to Keith Coleman. Thank you for joining us tonight. Keith is an impact investor and a professional educator and a mental coach. He serves as a distinguished visitor scholar with MediaX at Stanford University, which is an interdisciplinary research and thought leadership program focused on transformational human learning experience. Keith also served as the District 3 president and division chair for diversity and inclusion at the USPTA in California, Southern California division. So Keith is going to be here to talk to us about, his role with mental coaching and all of that. But I want to also add that Keith is a parent and a proud son of ATA champion who won our 14 and under this year. So welcome, Keith. My first question to you is, can you talk about how the student athlete might deal with adversity and reimagine themselves?
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Deanne. And it's great to see you, Art, and pleasure to see you as well, Robert. And hi to everyone that's out there in the digital space. So thanks for the plug about my son winning the ATA championship this summer at the National Tennis Center in Lake Nona. And that's one example of how a young person perhaps can be able to sort of get over adversity. We are in California and going to Florida in the middle of summer with 89 degrees and a lot of humidity. In that particular case, the challenge was clearly related to climate and environment. And so one of the things for him and for many is, how do we help ourselves to be able to reset? And it's not only reset words that can help in terms of being able to allow individuals to kind of reclaim being calm and being mindful. Also with affirmations and et cetera, to help them turn what they may view as something being negative in the moment back into something that actually in some respects is either A, positive, or much more neutral in many respects. And so I think there are particular tools that young student athletes and our student athletes in particular, I think want to use as these tools in many respects are not only for sport, but they're actually also for life, and certainly to assist them in their journey of learning and their academic practice. So those are the kind of tools that many coaches and mental coaches put forward for young student athletes.
Okay, great. All right. And then my second question is, can you share insights on a healthy parent-coach relationship? Like, how is that triangle for you? Like, Art gave you some of his. Let's hear what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, so, in some respects, it's a triangle. I like circles. So it's a circle too. I think that context is key here in terms of parents and student athletes and that relationship with the coach. I do certainly agree with Art in saying that parent education is really, really critical. Oftentimes parents, they too themselves can get stuck in the allure of believing that their son or daughter, is going to go pro. We certainly see that in two other sports in terms of basketball and football, and how some of that kind of systematic belief system by parents sometimes can really challenge young student athletes, African-American student athletes, with the kind of pressure that perhaps is not something that works in their favor. And what I mean by that in particular is we can really see that oftentimes academics and other kind of holistic practices that can make the whole child and the whole individual, sometimes they get put they're not as emphasized as the focus on the sporting activity itself. And so some might not believe that can occur inside of the game of tennis, but I think that those kind of mindsets can still also manifest themselves inside of the game of tennis. And so I think it's really important, again, that there's this learning and development and connection between student athlete, parent, and coach in really meeting these young people where they are. We hear that term a lot, especially inside of the education space. We've heard it through the last 2 years of COVID in public education and private education. And oftentimes the adults, unfortunately, have fallen short in meeting young people where they are. So I really believe that having more of a Socratic kind of a method, really asking questions, certainly allowing the young person to be able to answer those kind of questions as well as the parent. And then also writing is very, very important. Understanding a personal philosophy is very, very important. That's something else that other coaches that practice mindfulness and et cetera do for their student athletes. So I think all of those kinds of things can really help in that student athlete coach and parent sort of circle.
Okay. So a couple of parents had written in and asked about the progression of your athlete, and especially if they're just starting out now, they're 12 and under, let's say. How do you get them progressing to be ready for like college or something like that? Any thoughts on that, Art? We can start with you.
Well, I believe that, the development of the mechanics of the game should be, like develop the stroke production first. Yeah, I don't like to hear conversations when it's so much emphasis on tournaments and things before. You need to develop your game and be in a comfortable environment without a lot of pressure to develop, not have to be worrying about competition, and the competition being more important than, developing your forehand, your backhand, your serves, your spin. So I think that, patience is really of the ultimate, you know what I mean? Like, you got to take your time and create a comfortable environment where you just, as they acquire the skills, then you go out and do more and more. But I'm not for a lot of pressure about doing things that you're really not prepared to do yet. That's not where I coach. In stages, everything comes in stages, trifles, a little bit at a time. You know what I mean? Michelangelo said trifles make for perfection, and perfection is no trifle. So little bits gradually is what makes it happen.
Okay. And Keith, what do you think about that?
I agree. This idea of psychological safety is not just for counseling or, some kind of traditional therapeutic psychological practice. That's for us. That's for Black folks in America.
Mhm.
And so when we're looking at our young student athletes, as Art was describing, that's very important to create that early, because that will allow folks to be able to sort of broaden themselves. That may allow them to be able to have a bit more self-agency and et cetera.
Yeah.
as well as allow them to be able to explore, another side of that is Art was describing stroke production. But I think early on, the other things that I think that young student athletes, 12, trying to really move forward, and that's a good age, is to look at sports science. We take a lot of time to really talk about the physics and the mathematics and the geometry of sport, so that topspin actually becomes something that's relevant. So they understand that that's Newton's third law, and it's the Magnus effect, and they can really understand, what happens when air comes under an object and air goes over the object. In this case, the object is the ball, and how that actually works and functions. And so that can allow them to sort of think about that in a different way, and that also translates into the classroom. The other thing is, I think early on, stroke production, obviously very key. David Nankins, a great coach on tour, and I spent some time learning from him. He does a lot of movement. He's less technical, a lot of movement, a lot of balance, because you can have great stroke production, but if you're unable to have good balance and have movement, then you'll have challenges on the court. And so I think bringing all those things together can really help a 12-year-old move forward in a productive way.
Well, that again, speaking to what you're saying, coordination is so important. This is why, you know, like I have my kids that really do the Sinawali fighting sticks. I got specialized nunchucks that we make that are not dangerous, that, you know, allow them to, because figure eight motion can be, you know, you can have your shoulder as an axis, you can have your elbow as an axis, you can have your wrist. And so the fineness of the wrist movement, of the figure eight movement with nunchucks, that's why I use the martial arts tools. By the time a child learns the tools, their tennis automatically improves because their mind is constantly growing. When I'm talking to coaches, and I want to know, well, how do you help build your players' mentality, their mental game? Because I like to use mental endurance. That's what happens. They get out there, you need mental endurance. So I'm into repetition, I'm into numbers, I'm into counting, I'm into variety of tools. Constantly, I don't have to really say much when they're on the court hitting the ball. If there's something wrong, I go to a tool that will create the timing. So just when we're talking about physics, we're talking about conservation of angular momentum. I use bull whips. I use tools that are dangerous, but not in a dangerous way, because you develop them so that their mind is, you know, you got to be ready. And so you take these things in stages, but you need the attention. Ultimately, the kids trying to develop, you know, when we talk about concentration, we need them to pay attention to the ball. Ultimately, that's what we're going to hit. We're going to hit this ball. So we need to learn how to pay attention. That carries over into many other things. Once you begin to learn how to pay attention, you know, and, you know, so we can say focus and all, but like Keith said, when the ball is moving through the air, when it bounces, what kind of angular momentum is on it? Is when it's going to, why do we shoot backspin in basketball? So I've talked to many, I never heard really as a youngster, a basketball coach, you know, you shoot backspin and you shoot it soft because when a ball hits the surface, there's going to be a rebound spin. And so we should be learning these principles of physics, just like Keith is saying, right along, you should be learning science, the science of sports, and you will learn what torque, that we need torque. What is it? How do you get it? You understand? And so if you're really teaching, but like I said, kids, I see kids going to academies, all they do is drill, all they hit balls at a certain point. It's not productive. They're not learning. They don't know how to learn and pay attention and concentrate. And you need tools and different to get their concentration. That's just, you know, if you really teach.
I agree with that. And the tools are practical tools that can be actionable in nature for the young person themselves, student athletes themselves. And when they're able to practice that, as Art's describing, that really drives and fosters like a learned industriousness, you know, which really starts to build a self-determination that can help them, you know, do well in matches that can become very, very challenging. And those things, again, you know, carry over into the whole individual, the whole person, the whole child, and can assist them in their academic journey as well, which to me, in many respects, is first and foremost, and that will drive the ability of the player. I mean, one could just take a look at how Mr. Ashe, you know, prepared for that 1975 Wimbledon final against Jimmy Connors. I mean, that was brilliant. It was chess, it was deception, it was misdirection, it was math, geometry, and physics, and it was mindset. It was mindfulness. I mean, when you watch him do that, he looked so calm. He didn't look like he had anger in his face. No, he was mindful and meditative, and he was just cruising. And so those kinds of things, I believe, will be helpful for us as Black folks in this country, and for our young folks, because of what this country is about, for us to continue to learn those things and practice those things in this beautiful game of tennis that can help our young people be their best selves, you know, moving forward, whether they go to university, become entrepreneurs, scientists, or some of them go pro.
Yeah, and I think that is spot on, Keith. And, you know, what I was wondering is, in all of that, where do you see the role of the parent in that whole process to encourage the, you know, and stay in their lane?
Well, you know, parent university is an interesting concept. You know, we have professional development training in our in industry and in our professional lives. You know, sometimes I don't know if parents are maybe doing enough of that in some respects. But I believe that parents need to kind of take a step back, and parents need to ask themselves the question, all parents, but in particular, you know, African-American parents, you know, are we drinking the Kool-Aid in the sense of pushing our children down a path in a manner which perhaps maybe not be in their best interest? And again, I'll say this, listening to other coaches and from other sports, in particular basketball and football, you know, we all have people that we know that played pro in other sports, and I have friends that played, you know, hoop professionally and football, and now coaches that are in travel ball. And some of what they say is that it's not the kids, it's the parents. Who are really pushing hard, and that's okay if there's balance. And within that balance, you know, focus on things mindful, things meditative, growth mindset, and academic interest. You know, so I really hope that the parents can be humble and curious, and they can relay that humility and that curiosity to their young kids.
Yeah, anything for you?
Yeah, Keith is on point with that. See, the difference now, back in the day, we had all these clubs. So we came from a support system. Arthur Ashe came from the Richmond Racquet Club. I came from the North End Tennis Club. We had Lewis Glass coming out of New York. We had the Cosmopolitan. You know, we came from these clubs. But now most of the players that I see, a lot of girls on tour with their fathers, they are going at it in an individual way. They don't come from clubs. They've been raised at academies. They don't have any kind of support system. There is no balance. You understand? We had the whole Black country rooting for Arthur Ashe, for Althea Gibson, for all of us that came through the ATA. We had the entire support of the ATA. You got to be the hierarchy in the ATA. We had this whole support system. We came from communities. They don't come from communities. They come from tennis academies. And so the tennis academy, first of all, you know what I mean? Like, it's hard to find your comfort zone. I noticed in the coaching sense. So, you know, like opportunities that I give some of our kids, they would not get any other. The coaches can't do it. They can't afford it. They don't know, they can't blend them in. Black kids need an exceptional situation. It's a little bit, you got to be committed to it. You need a different kind of commitment. It's just different. We don't grow up on the private lessons, you know, and so when I see these poor kids that are out there with no connection, they're not grounded at all. They got no support system. And so they're just going from one academy to another academy. There's no real elite, you know. I don't see that as, that's not community building tennis. The way the ATA was, we had the top alphas. I mean, Kinkle Jones founded the alphas. Lucy Slow. So we got to look at the hierarchy of who was running Black tennis. Highly educated people founded the ATA for health benefits, good recreation. That first generation didn't play good tennis. So when we talk about HBC tennis, that's something that really gets to me. People really think that going to HBCs and helping their team, which predominantly Russian and whatnot, is going to develop Black tennis. Black tennis was at its height at Black schools when the student bodies were a part of tennis. You need tennis in the phys ed class. Those are the people that are going to have the jobs, who can have the surplus money, whose child might be a tennis player. Because when I came up with the tennis, we all were members of the club. There wasn't all these programs so we all paid the membership. $25, you're a member of the club. We had certain events that had fundraisers, and we split the money up and we go to the ATA Nationals with everybody gets $100 each or whatever. So, you know, we came from a community. The doctors, Dr. William Haling, one of the founders, 100 Black Businessmen. This was my mentors. I grew up under these guys at the tennis club. I mean, when he said, you know, when I asked him, what do you do? He said, how you like my Alfa Romero? I'm an OBGYN. And, you know what I mean? It was a different whole kind of environment. Now it's about being a pro. And so the kids have really got a tough situation. that's a tough place to be in. So that for me, going to Hampton works for me. My brother went to Rutgers. It didn't work as good for him. Lewis Glass went to UCLA. So there was I knew my niche.
Mhm.
Like, I'm going to Hampton and this is going to work for me and I'm going to graduate in 4 years.
Right.
But I had role models. See, my philosophy is based on each one, teach one. So every time I invest in a kid, he's going to have to give back to another kid. So we need these role models. And we don't have them. You understand? You don't have them. You go off to an academy, you got a different kind of role model. You go over here, you go to, you know, it's not like you're in a fight gym. If you're in a gym and you and your coach meet up and your coach cares about you and you care about him, and that's the way it is. And then you go over here to a cage, you're going to have 10 guys competing against each other and you being honest. That's not my scene. I don't want 10, 12 and under. I want 2 of them, a 12 and under, a 14 under, somebody that I don't want to be untrue. I want to be really a part of it. And so, in order, our kids we use a different kind of coaching thing, and you have to be successful enough to help them. Without my business being successful, I can't help somebody. I can't help. Okay, how you gonna have somebody have no resources? You know what I mean? So this is the real stuff. You got to have some resources to help. And
yeah, you know, listening to you, it reminds me, and we did have some brief conversations about the nature of NJTL and the attempts to try and have that you know, entity continue to sort of drive opportunity in our communities for kids having exposure to tennis. And I'm not a naysayer or anything like that. I'm about innovation and being nimble and agile and moving forward and trying to make things better. So I would challenge, you know, the USTA, USPTA, and others to continue to reimagine NJTL, because a lot of what Art is talking about is that it comes back to the sense of connection and community, and especially in talking about academies where perhaps the idea of mattering and meaning, which what you were describing about what happened 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, it's different now. Unfortunately, because there's been a separation. I don't want to say it's because of you know, integration, but and assimilation, but it's different now. And so I think that means that we've got to find another way to drive that sense of community. I just hear stories from my, you know, when my mother was alive, coming from a small town in Kentucky, then going off to Fisk, you know, and that's where she met my dad, and well, there's community.
Right.
There's always community there. And so, you know, helping to sort of refashion that so that mattering and meaning, as you were saying, you know, for our young student athletes can be first and foremost. And the ATA continues to do a really, really wonderful job at that. And I just want to say that, you know, this summer, especially the Althea film that was shown and some of the other things that were put forward for not just the student athletes, but the parents as well, is a part of that continued focus on mattering and meaning and community. So just wanted to, again, give us that and the ATA family that shout out for continuing to do that important work.
Yeah, and I see Tony Wiley put a post in the chat that the NJTLs should be recognized and a funded brand, and that we need more Black NJTL directors to help shape the programs. So yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to ask one other question. That you had something to say, Art. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say we need middle class Black America. We need the doctors and this is the people that made up the ATA when I was growing up. We had a hierarchy of people that were, you know what I mean, they were the models that, and so this education, what Keith is talking about was, you know what I mean, like a full scholarship to Hampton with me was like pro tennis. People ask me like, how'd I, you know, like that was it for me. It gave me a whole life just from playing tennis in a little community. And so I feel for Osaka and them. They're so lonely that because it's there's no, you need to be a part of something. So that's very important to be, yeah. And so I feel for these young players when they're just going around trying to make it. And again, environment is a very, you know, that's the whole ball game. If you can get a comfortable environment with good people, that, you know, that's
so one of our One of our parents in the webinar asked a question in the registration process of how do you go about finding these programs? I mean, I know they can come to us and we will try to find a club in their area, but how is other ways of finding a really good club?
You speaking to Keith?
For both of you.
Oh, are you wanna go to that, Keith? I don't want to monopolize.
I don't know. Um,
Yeah,
well,
see,
you
that's
know,
where it's tough. It's got to
Yeah,
be in the
I mean,
community. If you start in
we can help sometimes, but not in every community, but we try our best.
yeah, perhaps what we can do is and maybe ATA has done this, I'm not sure, is through members,
Mhm.
you create
Yeah, we have our coaches that come to our championships and we can give their information out, but that's just,
yeah, so the programs, find a way, since now we're in the digital world, how this information can somehow be digitized so that it's very, very seamless and user friendly for people to be able to see it. So I'm affiliated still with Fred and Richard Williams over at Rancho Cienega, and they helped to shepherd the first Venus and Serena's first academy in South LA. And then obviously there's a host of others in Southern California. But is there a registry that somebody can just go look up and say, oh, well, hey, I want to
No.
find
Yeah.
something in this part of the city, and I don't know if that actually exists, but that would be helpful. I think, and it'd also be helpful because if somebody goes to another city for whatever function, that's somebody's wedding or travel or whatever, and that they want their kids to sort of go try and play some tennis while they were there, they can go to where we are instead of having to go to someplace else.
Well,
Dan, oh, go ahead.
at the height of the ATA, it's still the adults make the players. We got to get back to reality. See, I think the ATA lost its way with trying to emphasize junior development and trying to compete with the USTA and making championship players. When we were where Black adults came in got into recreational tennis. And then the competition comes after that. We had to get Black adults on the tennis courts. We got to get it so it's visible. We can't just have it where you got a program where there's no money. You need the Black programs where, because if you like we talk about NJTL, it's great, but where does the kid get his racket strung? So if you put a program, like you got to have, it's just a dream world we're talking about. Where do you get the rackets from? It's a whole different thing. So that tennis really started as a middle class game. I still think you got to fuel a game from a middle class and work it down. Energy goes from a big source to smaller sources. You can't just go start on the bottom and think that you're going to grow it there without, that's
Okay.
just to me. You got to, back to the ATA, got to help local communities find people of interest in tennis that are truly interested, and they see somebody they want to help. Me as a kid, Sidney Llewellyn came over to our club. He had us at 12 years old. That was Aldia Gibson's coach. That's who we started with. We got our first group lesson. The adults provided that. The adult Black tennis is what fueled the American Tennis Association. And there was a time when there was an adult week and a junior week. And the juniors that stayed for the adult week had to get to the semifinals to do it. Like his son won the juniors at 14, then he could stay the second week with the adults. And that's when Arthur Ashe and Althea and everybody be rolling in. And then they would come back and do exhibitions. Do we have professionals come to the ATA Nationals and do exhibitions? Because Althea and Arthur used to come back and do, you know what I mean? So again, the models of, like we need a who's who. My son, my granddaughters, they all played nationals, but they don't know like I know, because everybody went to the ATA back in the day. Everybody was there. So the ATA needs a who's who. The kids need to know each other around the country. That's a support system for them, to just know other kids that are tennis players, that go on college campuses, that you don't have to. I love the fact that I didn't have to fight it out. Going to the ATA was going around nice kids. I meet them from Chicago, met them from Boston, met them from California, from Louisiana, all over the country. You understand? We need to be in these environments. Go on a college campus where you feel safe, you're eating regular meals. And you know what I mean? We got to create these events that bring these kids together, because when I would go back to Elizabeth from the summer, I wasn't the same. I was with everybody, but I wasn't the same. I was touched by something else that gave me a vision, that I knew I was going to Hampton. Because when I went to the dorms, when I went to the Black campus and the cafeteria, and I was around professors, and you understand, and I was like, oh, this is the life for me. Education by Yao. You understand? The tennis just was a way to get to it. So the tennis fueled that education for me. You know what I mean? It gave me a chance to raise my social. I didn't realize getting good in tennis allowed me to not go to New Haven, the ATA New England tournament, and stay in the YMCA Cockroach Hotel renting a room. I'm like, get good, and people will invite you to their homes, you know. So anyway, you know.
So I have a
that's what it
couple
is.
more questions before we wrap up, as we're coming close to the hour here. One of the parents wanted to know what your thoughts were on girls playing against boys, what you think that does for their psyche, like when you're in UTR and it's about level. I know I have a
that, Keith?
point on that, but I'll let you guys say it, because I have a daughter.
So you said, what was the second part of that? Was that about UTR and points?
Yeah,
and
like,
stuff?
you know, like how it can be girls playing against boys. How do you think that helps a girl with her psyche or not to be, but you know, in a competitive situation with a boy?
Well,
You think girls should be playing against boys, pretty much is what they're asking.
sure. However, you know, if you have a girl that, even with a UTR and someone is solid, let's say, but they're younger, and they're playing against, let's say, a boy that's a little bit older, possibly there might be some other challenges in terms of just size, strength, speed, power, and things like that. But if they're, you know, they're solid enough and not in their game, but then also solid, you know, mentally, I say go for it. You know.
Exactly.
Let me give you a little history here. Bonnie Logan. You familiar with Bonnie Logan? Okay, well,
Yes.
Bonnie Logan won the ATA title many times, and Bonnie Logan went to Morgan, and Bonnie Logan and Ann Coger played on the men's team at Morgan while I was at Hampton, and Bonnie Logan got to the finals against me in the CIAA. I played her in the finals. She was the second best men's tennis player in the CIAA when I was in 1968.
Wow.
So, and Ann Coger was her doubles partner. And so I had beat Bonnie in the finals, and then we beat him in doubles. So there goes for as far as it's all about whether you can play. You know. So
Okay. Well, I know that the one last question everybody had was about funding, because tennis is an expensive sport, especially as you're trying to get your child up the levels of competition. The higher you go, the more money it is. And so would anybody want to talk to that? Robert, you want to talk to that?
Well, one of the things that at the ATA we're trying to do is partner with as many organizations and grassroots organizations to let them know that we are here and what we are trying to do. And, you know, I went up to the Carrington Academy, got to sit with Art earlier this year. And, you know, he was talking about back in the 30s and 40s, we had 200 various clubs around the country. Now, a lot of that stemmed from Jim Crow. So now when you figure we're at a point now where you're really, a lot of people in our community, the doctors, the lawyers, they've moved out of those communities. And so now when we try and build a new model, a new paradigm, we have to really culturally try and reach out to folks and say, well, if you really are sincere about helping, we at the ATA have to put something on the table for them to help. And that is what we're trying to do now, is by going around the country. For example, we have reached out to the Weekend Warriors tennis circuit. So they're probably coming. We've got our mid-tech folks that we've got to do a better job of working with. All of our former players, we have to be more open to bring them in and to get these ideas. Also, if anybody wants to volunteer on grant writing or can help us connect with potential sponsorship, these are the things. Also, the ATA, we're trying to be more transparent in terms of how we operate, things like that. And so I'm very excited about the future of the ATA and what we have to do. It's a big task. Now remember, we're 100% volunteer, and it has been that way. But I think if we can get our message across to, and with the help of Art, and those who haven't read Art's book, you need to pick that up because it is really invaluable. And not that Art, I don't want to shame you, but Art has like a treasury art trove up there of all types of exhibit. And these are things that we need to try and get into the National African American Museum and places like that, because this is the type of treasures we don't want to fall off where we can't find them. So I know that was a long story, but anyway, I'm really thankful for both Art and Keith for joining us today. And we really appreciate you guys.
Yeah,
Thank you
and
very much. Nice meeting you, Keith.
we are giving away a copy of Art's book. So if the first person who could type in the chat to answer this question of who played Jimmy McDaniels in 1940 in an exhibit match in Harlem, and this was a white professional player.
Number one player in the world. He was
Number
number
one
one player in the world at the time.
Oh, Leslie got it. Leslie got it first. I should have said no cheating from the professional
pros.
players, Leslie.
Yeah, no pros.
No pros can answer. Or USPA workers, Tony.
Hey, Robert, one thing we need, the ATA needs a relationship with Black tennis pros. They need a relationship with tennis pros that want to help your cause.
Yeah.
There's no relationship between the ATA and former ATA players. There's no, you know what I mean? We need some kind of, version of the USPTA or so the ATA. And there's a lot of coaches out here that have been affected by the ATA, come from the ATA, but there's no place for them. You know what I mean? There's nothing, there's no relationship with these. I think you need to have some kind of relationship, some kind of pro organization.
Yeah, that is a question. When I was sort of part of leadership here in Southern California for USPTA, you would always, I've done this professionally my whole career. You end up being like one of only one or two in the room as usual.
Right.
So I think that is an issue. And then Mr. Bynum put in the chat another kind of a question, which is something that goes just across industry in this country and industry of sport. And that is Black coaches not getting their due in terms of their capabilities and being able to go with their student athletes or players at that point to the next level. So I don't know if anybody wants to sort of, if anybody saw Mr. Bynum's question in the chat about Black coaches not being able to follow their players as they continue to develop and get better. We get X'd out and then they go somewhere else. So I don't even know if anybody wants to talk about that.
But now you're talking about the economics.
Well, that's what I'm ready to say.
Go ahead, Art.
Well, money makes sports that make money, you know what I mean? So, like you got these team owners of craft and whatnot, you need money. That's one of the things I'm saying. You can't just travel the world with a player who's going to finance you going around the world with one player. You know what I mean? So that's why you need a community. You need to show that you got a community and that you got a shining star that comes out of your program. But I'm a believer and we need programs. One of the problems in America is all of the good pros get bought up by people with money whose kids are not any good. Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it like that, but there's so many people with the money, see they want a pro, they buy the pro. Then they got all the good pros working with one family, you understand? Instead of this pro having a whole community around himself, he's on the road traveling, and he's only one, you know what I mean? So we need these good guys to have a community around them. You can't just travel with one player. It costs too much money. Who's going to finance that? Everybody wants to be.
Tony Wiley, she raised a good point, and Keith, this goes back to the accountability. We as a community and as coaches have to be accountable, and being certified is really good because now you have safe play. Parents want to make sure that if we have a coach, irrespective of color, that he has the qualification and, you know, he's not a pedophile.
Yeah, well, I understand that. That's another
Didn't
whole.
mean to get
you
so
know.
raw.
Go there.
Hey, Art, I didn't mean to get so raw, but
No,
you know, when you get
no.
these parents, they want to make sure their kids are safe.
Yeah, well, that's what I tell my people all the time. But my program is very visible, so there's no, it's all out. You see him, we see everybody all the time. You understand? That's the way I like it, and so that's why I say the parents are very important in my program. The parents' involvement, but I know that the Black parents that I have. First of all, I do a lot of business out of the Black barbershop. So I'm in Amherst, Massachusetts. So you got professors and all kind of, people that walk through that can pay for their child's involvement in tennis. So once you get to the point where, when you're looking for, that's another whole industry if you're looking for money. Because if you got a good pro, you got to pay him to help a kid out. And so who says what kid is worthy of the help? That's why if you got a community thing and the cream rises or you work out, my philosophy is be your own best student. If you want to be good at something, be your own best student. Do as much you can do for yourself. Learn how to do for yourself. That's what my coaching technique is all about. I teach you the principles. The principles work everywhere, all the time, for anybody, they're principles. And so if you practice with these principles, if you use tools that ultimately will give you the timing and the sequence that you need, then you're gonna be better on the tennis court. You may not have as much money. When I was telling my father, the white boys got better practice, this, that, and other thing. And my father tell me, get a better serve then and serve them off the court. You saying, what do you want me to do? Cry the blues with you here? What can you do for yourself? You understand? So that's really all it comes
So I
down
guess
to.
the bottom line is that you guys are agreeing, because I think the question is there a value in certification?
It is a value, but at 50, I've been teaching tennis for 50-some years. So, I mean, USPTR, USPTA, none of them come to me. I'm a Black man that's been making a living since 1969 teaching tennis. That's not worthy to put in front of other Black kids. You want more Blacks, then why don't you show more Blacks? If you want other Blacks, then you got to take this Black. I got 2 granddaughters at LSU. We got 4 generations of tennis here in my family. I never get a call from anybody about anything other than a free podcast. We're like, how did you make a living all these years? That's what these young guys need to know. How can you make some money teaching tennis? If you're making some money, you can help a kid that comes to the courts where you are. Just like John Wilkerson developed Zena and Laurie into the top 10 of the world. Nobody knows that. This guy had 2 players at the top of the world. You understand? But so you got to know how to. Fortunately, I'm from New Jersey. Every day I went and played my father's number. So I know that you need this whole thing. Every day on the way to school, I went and played my father's number. So I know that the business cats were taking care of business. In the sports thing, you always see guys that was exports on the corner. But the number man was collecting every day. So I'm like, business is what makes this thing happen. And so you got to be around some success to have some success. The good, goodness fruit comes from a goodness tree. That's what I tell them. You know what I'm saying? You want to be good, you got to practice with that mentality. You got to have definiteness of purpose. You got to come every day and work on something that you're working on. What can you do for yourself? Not every day. What can somebody do for you? What are you going to do and put into this? And if you do that, you're going to be all right. You don't worry about anything. So
yeah, I'm a believer in self-determination theory and self-agency and all the rest of that. But what I continue to see in the chat and what we all know is it does come back to funding and finance. And it's clear that in multiple other sports, in particular, let's say basketball and football, that's just a money machine. So travel ball, all these other things are making other people money,
right,
using our talent. And so that's how those things are being manifested. So how are we able to sort of create a new mechanism for finance in tennis for our young kids? That's something that we want to put our thinking caps on. And
that's challenging.
And
John Lucas
And as
I'm
Robert was
sorry.
describing, no, as Robert was describing, part of that is looking at new public-private partnerships that the ATA can engage in, either for direct funding or other kinds of support. So, we got to keep looking at that. So, John Lucas, Art.
I was saying John Lucas was an Eastern NCAA champ at University of Maryland. He was a real baller, but he went with the guaranteed money of the NBA. Instead of having, you understand, it was guaranteed money in the NBA. I got a young boy in the 10th grade right now. He's 6'4". He served like Eisner. Hardly even plays tournaments. And the boy could be super duper. Whether I don't care whether he goes Divisions 3 or wherever he goes, he got a framework for his serve that is incredible. But he's playing basketball because that's part of the, you know what I mean? So unless we have environments that make it, you know what I mean, that draw this kind of stuff, and you need the finances to it, which is not basketball. We just don't have the finances. That's what I'm saying. You got good coaches. They got them. They want to make a living. They can make $200,000 a year coaching of 2 families. So they're not going to go to Newark and, and suffer. So anyway, to be continued.
Yeah.
This was great. This was great.
This was really good. So I really want to thank both of you. Martin Blackman was supposed to join us today, and his flight was delayed with all of the rain and was not able to make the panel tonight. So hopefully we'll bring him in on one of our next series to speak on what he was going to talk about. But I want to thank all the participants who joined us tonight, and definitely you, Art, and you, Keith. Thank you so much. So Robert,
Thank
do you
you,
want
Keith.
to close this? Robert?
Yeah, I just want to thank again everyone for joining the conversation, and in particular Art and Keith. We really appreciate you coming and giving up your time and to contribute to, so we can learn and benefit. And we really, and Art, we love you.
Hey, well, listen, if the USGA wants to learn and benefit, they need to send players up here, coaches up here to see me and see how you do this, and see how you can keep your rotator cuffs and keep yourself fit and informed. I'm 75 years old. I'm still doing my thing. So the fitness part, the training part, that's some stuff we need. Our players need to go to Philadelphia and talk to Bernard Hopkins. We need to be, our guys don't get to the right stuff. They don't have the right kind of guys talking to them. You can't get it. What we're trying to get from Black athletes, we ain't getting it out of those white academies. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. But it's not.
Art, Art, Martin.
You gotta bring it home. Tell the USTA they gotta come home with it.
Take issue.
Huh?
I know. Martin might take issue with that.
Take issue.
All right, so listen.
Hey, man.
We'll
definitely ask Martin.
But that was 35 years ago, though. So that was different.
Art, they want to know where they can find you.
I'm in Amherst, Mass. You mentioned Connecticut, but I'm in Amherst, Massachusetts.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry.
Yeah, we're right down the street from Amherst College. I'm at Hampshire College in Amherst. You know, right? And so I love.
We will be putting some links to Art's tutorials on his innovation and training. He has
Facebook
a
and
website.
Instagram. That's where you
Yeah,
got to
so
go.
we'll
to
be
see
putting
some
a
of my
link
stuff.
to all of that there, so you can get it from our ATA website. Get links there. So again, thank you, Art. Thank you, Keith.
All right.
And
Thanks,
you,
everybody.
everyone. All righty.
Keith,
Good
see you later.
night.
All right. Take
All
care.
right.
everyone.
All right.
Okay,
Robert,
bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Nasir. All
Take
right.
care.